Welcome to our fifth session on QuickBooks Pro 2013 for Georgia cities. I'm Sabrina Cape with Capable Financial Solutions, and I'll be leading our session today. Pam Helton with GMA and other members of GMA staff have worked throughout the year, and they're in constant contact with the membership based upon what they've heard from their visits with small cities around the state of Georgia. We've developed this tool today as a fifth in our series to help these cities that are currently using QuickBooks to optimize its functionality and use to the best of their ability. QuickBooks Pro 2013 is not technically designed for fund accounting, which is required in local governments, but QuickBooks is a less expensive alternative that many cities have turned to use in conjunction with their software applications such as utility billing, occupational tax, property tax, etc. to report on the city's financials. We've attempted to combine the specifics within QuickBooks Pro 2013 with material that is specific to Georgia cities, such as the Uniform Chart of Accounts and other financial related laws, to help our cities understand how to use that QuickBooks product more efficiently in their day-to-day operations of running City Hall. Keep in mind that QuickBooks has not been designed to perform fund accounting as it truly exists that is unique to government. We've created some workarounds to help us make QuickBooks Pro 2013 adapt to our needs. We've started our tutorials using QuickBooks Pro 2013, so we're wrapping those up using QuickBooks Pro 2013. If you're using 2014 or 2015, the look may be slightly different, but it's not drastically different if you're using that later version. We are not representing QuickBooks in these tutorials. All rights related to QuickBooks remain with Intuit, and you'll see a notation at the bottom of each screen to that effect. In our previous sessions, we've learned how to set up the chart of accounts, use accounts payable for vendor payments, and to process payroll using that payroll subscription with QuickBooks. With this session, we'll be learning how to use the cash receipting part of QuickBooks to reconcile the bank statements and to find the best reports in QuickBooks that are the most helpful in the functioning of the accounting side of City Hall. Just a few reminders on terminology and navigation as we begin. Home is in the upper left, and it's always what takes you to the main page. The area in yellow is how you get to the functional areas in QuickBooks, and if I'm looking for something, this is typically the area that I use. QuickBooks calls this icon bars. When you're working with receipting, it will be the customer area that we will work in. The area which is circled in orange is where the process flow happens from day to day, and you should not skip steps in process flow because this will create issues inside QuickBooks. For example, you must receive a payment before you record a deposit if you're using QuickBooks as a fully functional accounts receivable package. The red arrow indicates you can click on those and it will take you to that full section. For receipting, we could use receipt payments if we use QuickBooks as a total receivables package, or we could use record deposits if we're not using QuickBooks as a full receivables package. We'll be discussing this as we go further along. First, let's start with the revenue cycle. The revenue cycle starts when we invoice or bill a customer, then we receive that customer's payment. If the customer doesn't pay, then we try to collect from the customer by adding penalties and interest that are allowed by our local and state ordinances, and then we track those delinquencies. In QuickBooks, this is what is called a process flow, and it is denoted by icons in QuickBooks: create invoice, receive payment, record deposits. However, government has some things that are self-reported to them that truly skip the invoicing function, but the government wants to track the detail to make sure that the monthly payment or quarterly payment that is being received, no payments are being missed, and because the city has the responsibility for following up on any of these self-reported payments that are not being paid at the frequency they should be. This is why cities often choose to use QuickBooks as a total receivables package so that they can capture all of the detail by entity that pays the city. You will notice if we go to the left-hand side icon bars and we click on our customer area, our customer database in QuickBooks is empty at this point. If you're going to track where payments come from, such as using this to track alcohol taxes, for example, you would want to enter your customers here. This can also be used to track other self-reported payments, such as distributors or franchise payments. For our training purposes here in QuickBooks, a customer represents any entity that is paying the city in the form of cash, check, or credit card. The city typically receives funds from those that the city bills for something, but also receives funds from organizations that self-report items such as franchise payments, hotel motel, liquor by the drink, etc. If you wish to run reports to see what payments have been made by different companies, then you must set up QuickBooks Receivable option that we are demonstrating here. If you bypass the customer area, you can still capture your deposits and still reconcile your bank statements, but you will not be able to get the level of detail on individual companies that you desire. Normally, when cities use QuickBooks for the receipt of payment and they bypass that customer area, it's because the city has a subsidiary system, such as an occupational tax database or a property tax database, that is separate from QuickBooks, where they maintain all of the detailed billing and collection records. Therefore, before you even start using QuickBooks, you must first determine if you have other subsidiaries, or is QuickBooks going to be your main source to capture all billing and collection information. We'll show you how to use QuickBooks for the total receivable function. More effort is required in setup if you choose to use the receivable function, but the reporting benefits are helpful in the revenue collection process and in your audit process. When we click on New Customer and Job, and then click New Customer, when the drop-down menu occurs, we will begin to enter the specific data about the customer that we want to capture. Here is the New Customer box, and you'll notice it has 5 tabs down the side to enter information. The address information, which is mainly phone numbers, email addresses, and mailing addresses. We will enter information on a vendor for this tab before proceeding to the Payment Settings tab. Here is an example of entering an organization that pays the city an electric franchise. Information can normally be obtained from the letter or check that is provided when making a payment to the city. The first time you receive a payment from a customer, the customer record will have to be established before accepting payments on that customer. On the Payment Settings tab, if you have an account number, I would insert it there in the first field. On the payments terms, there's a drop-down menu, but I would suggest that we add some that are more helpful in revenue planning, such as the frequency of payment, quarterly, monthly, yearly, because self-reported revenue is normally received on different frequencies, and it's important to track that sometimes. I would still keep the net terms because the city will bill things that are due in 30 days, for example. In this example, we're going to select yearly because that is how often Georgia Power tends to pay its cities. On the method of delivery, for self-reported payments, I would select none. This is actually how do you want to get an invoice, and on self-reported payments, we're actually not going to be sending an invoice, so that's why we would put none. If you select mail, you will always print a paper invoice, and if you select email, of course, the invoice will actually be emailed to the customer. If you choose to capture the credit card information, I would research what your ordinances and laws say about protecting this data in the event of a data breach. I personally do not recommend that you keep credit card information on file, but you would want to consult your city attorney to determine what the city wishes to do. I would skip the Sales Tax Settings tab, and on the Additional Info tab, I would suggest making the customer types the different revenue types that we collect, and the rep the different city employees that might be responsible for that task. For example, you may list alcohol as a type, and Sue might be the rep on that, and then list occupational tax as a type, and maybe Joe is the rep on that. Of course, the rep field would not be helpful in the event you have one person at City Hall that is handling everything. Also, the defined fields are in here, but you can customize those fields and they will print on reports, and they will also help you sort inside Excel. Because in occupational tax, for example, you often need the E-Verify number, this might be an example of a good custom field to insert. If you need to capture number of employees, for example, because that is how your occupational tax is calculated, again, the custom field might be a good place to capture this information. The Job Info tab is to be used if you wish to bill a customer based on a certain type of job you are doing. For example, a public works project that you might want to track all the expenses for and then bill a customer. This is more of an advanced function of QuickBooks, and we're not going to be demonstrating in this tutorial, but I just wanted to mention it. Now this kind of concludes the setup of the customer. Now that we've got our customers set up, we can actually set up occupational tax and some franchise. That's what we've done in our example, but these principles can be applied to really any city revenues. We can now begin to use the functionality of the system. First, let's invoice occupational tax. Customer invoicing uses the item list to determine the customer billing. An item list is actually what will show up on the invoice when you invoice a customer. To access the item list to establish rates to charge the customer, we will click on List at the top menu bar, and then we will choose Item List. Then you will see it's blank at the moment because we have not established any at this point. We will go down to the drop-down menu in the lower left-hand corner, and we will click on New for us to begin entering the rate tables. Rate tables can typically be found in your ordinance. For occupational tax, for example, it might be based on the number of employees. For occupational tax, I prefer the other charge option here, and you'll select it by clicking drop-down arrow in the type field. To set up the table, the item name is what will print on the invoice, so this should be your description from your ordinance matrix out of your occupational tax ordinance, and then you will make this sub-item of occupational tax, for example, by clicking the drop-down menu and adding occupational tax. Now, the next time you enter a rate, the drop-down menu will be here for occupational tax. You will not need to re-add it each time. You'll enter the description and the amount from your rate table, and you'll elect the business and occupational tax general ledger revenue account under the account number field before clicking OK to save your item. You will continue entering these until all items that you send an invoice to a customer for have been inserted. For example, we would not create an item for the franchise payments because these are self-reported, but the item list is only used for those things that appear on an invoice that you will either mail or email to a customer, such as an occupational tax for a repeat business. That's just one example. Here is what the item list looks like after we've entered a few. The sub-items just help you to keep your list organized to help you find things and update them easier. So you'll see here we've entered 3 different ranges that will appear on the invoice. 0 to 2 employees will be invoiced at $125. 11 to 20 employees will be invoiced at $500. And 3 to 10 invoices will be invoiced at $250. Now that we have our customers in and our items in, we will begin to invoice them. Remember, you can get to the same place 3 different ways. Normally, once a year, occupational tax renewals are sent out by cities, so we will send those out now. You have 3 different options to create an invoice, and it depends on your preference only as to which one you use. If you go back to the home screen, you can get to invoicing by clicking on Create Invoices. You can also access by clicking on the customer in the menu bar and then selecting Create Invoices. Another way to access it is to click Customer in the icon center and then click New Transactions, New Invoice to begin the invoice process. Regardless of which method you choose, the invoicing screen will now appear. This is the invoicing screen. First, select the customer, and we are going to bill the golf shop. When you click the drop-down box, all of your items you entered appear, but if you see you failed to enter one, you can always add one by clicking the new, and you don't have to go back necessarily to the items list to do that. You can actually do it on the fly, for example. Before doing your occupational tax billing, you may want to print a customer report that has those customized fields we mentioned, such as the number of employees or the information about that company to do the billing from the occupational tax. On the invoice number, you can enter the invoice number like 2015-1, and then the system will generate the next one. This might help you to keep the years separate of occupational tax. The key is be consistent in your invoicing structure. After you enter all the information, you can either print the invoice or email the invoice depending on what was done in the customer setup, or you can actually change it right here. You'll notice the terms default to what was set up when the customer was set up, in this case 30 days. Please consult your ordinances and laws to determine the appropriate due dates when you set up your billing. Now when you click on customers where the yellow arrow is, you'll see in the customer center that we've created a few. We've set up some occupational tax invoices, and they now have balances which are denoted by those orange arrows. When you click on the customer center and you click on the transaction, the invoices you see have been created. The filters are at the top, so when you're looking at things, it sometimes makes it easier to locate them by using filters such as type and time frame. Now that invoices have been created, payments can be accepted. Let's see how we would accept a payment and make a deposit. From the home page, you will click Receive Payments in the middle of the screen. The drop-down menu will bring up all the customers, not just the ones that have open invoices, and you'll select the entity that is making the payment. In this example is the golf shop. You'll enter the check number, the date, and the amount, and then you will enter a check mark by the invoice that this particular golf shop is paying. Now that we have received the payment, we must record the deposit. So there's actually two steps. The record deposits can be accessed from the menu bar on top and click on banking and then make deposits, or from the home screen under the banking section in the lower right hand corner, just click on record deposits. When you click on record deposits, the payments to deposit dialog box comes up. All the payments that you have received through Receive Payments appear. You will check the ones that you are going to deposit today. Always check the bank account to make sure it is the correct bank account. QuickBooks does have a default for the bank account, which is your primary one, but always make sure that you are recording to the appropriate account. When you finish, click Save and Close, but if you happen to have another deposit to enter, click Save and New. After the items appear that you received payment for, if you have something, for example, that was self-reported, you can add it to your deposit here. For example, we add Georgia Power, and we actually select franchise as the general ledger account number, and we put a memo as to what they're paying for and the amount in which they've paid. I recommend that you print this page and attach it to your deposit for the backup for your audit process, and you can print this by using the top icon, which is denoted by the yellow arrow. Now if we go back to our customer center, we applied this payment for golf shop, but we also did one for Sweet Tooth that we didn't demonstrate inside the tutorial. So now if you click on the golf shop, you will see the activity screen to the right, and you can see both the invoice in which they were billed for $250 and the payment that has been received for them for $250, leaving them with that zero balance. We have just shown how to receipt payments using the full receivables package that QuickBooks has to offer. Now let's look at how the city might use QuickBooks if they have their detail of their payments tracked elsewhere, in a subsidiary ledger, such as an occupational tax module or a property tax module. And in QuickBooks, they just merely want to capture the deposit information in order to reconcile their bank statements and to record the revenue accounts. If using QuickBooks for only general ledger purposes, then you'd bypass the receive payments function and just click on record deposits on the home screen. Since you're not going to track who the payments are from under this method, you create a bogus customer like miscellaneous to capture all of this information by clicking add new and then establishing miscellaneous as a customer name. Also on this screen, the deposit account makes sure it is going to the correct cash account. The from account here is the general ledger account number. Therefore, when you do your daily deposit, you'll have to have some form of backup that shows you the subtotals from the categories of revenues. You'll need to know how much is from property tax, how much is from franchise, how much is from occupational tax, etc. If you plan to use QuickBooks like this, I recommend that you establish a memorized transaction so that the general ledger accounts will just pop up and you will insert the amounts on a daily basis. Normally, cities create some type of deposit tally summary form that is attached to your deposit slip, and this is a great source to set up the memorized transaction in this format so that keying coincides with your deposit information. We've spent more of our time in this tutorial on using QuickBooks as a total receivables package, but you can contact us if you have a specific situation and you need to set up a memorized template. Now that we've seen how to invoice, how to receive payments, and how to make deposits, we can now start to look at how to reconcile our bank statement each month. We must reconcile our bank statement each month on each cash account that we have, and we must not skip months in that reconciliation process. If we go back to the home page, reconciliation of our bank statement is found under the banking area within QuickBooks on the home screen, and it's in the lower left and denoted by the red arrow. Here's an example of a bank statement we will be using to help us reconcile our bank statements inside QuickBooks. We're going to be reconciling for the month of December, so now we'll go into QuickBooks to do that reconciliation process. A couple of things to notice here. First, make sure to select the right checking account and the date should automatically populate. If the date does not automatically populate, that must mean that you have skipped some reconciliations and you need to investigate before moving forward. And ending balance will be the ending balance from the bank statement, and you'll notice that we have entered 6213.58, and our beginning balance of $1 actually agrees to our bank statements, and our date is good at 12/31/2014 for us to continue. If you are entering your interest, you would enter it here. If you have service charges, you would enter it here, and you will put your date as the statement date, and you will select the appropriate general ledger account number before selecting continue. This is the reconciliation box. The left has checks and payments. The right has deposits and credits. The left are referred to as debits on our bank statement. The right is referred to as credits on our bank statement. The bank reconciliation process uses check marks to clear items which clear the bank, and we're going to start first by looking at the deposits. We take our bank statement, we click off all of the deposits that have actually cleared, and the credits on the bank statement say 763758, but yet our deposits say 763258, which are denoted by those yellow arrows. But we are technically okay because interest income is not considered a deposit, and the difference between those two is our interest that we receive. Well, what about that January deposit? Well, that makes sense. Remember, we're doing a December reconciliation, and because we're doing a December reconciliation, a January deposit should not have cleared the bank statement, and it still should be open. We place a check mark beside each item that has cleared the bank, and again, now we're doing the check side and the payment side, and we want to make sure that the two agree. So the $1,425 agrees both within our bank statement and with our checks and payments inside QuickBooks. Now we want to make sure that the difference in our bank reconciliation, denoted by the red arrow, is a 0, and in this case it is, so we know that we're good. But what about those old checks that are out there for July? Well, the December one might just have not cleared yet. That might be a timing issue. But the July ones should be investigated because they're old, and we need to make sure that they actually don't need to be voided and reissued. And just remember that the Department of Revenue has a sheet property guidelines in the event you need to void checks. And you might want to refer to that in the event that you're having to, you're unable to find how to get those checks to the appropriate people. Now that we've reconciled our bank statement, it's time for us to run some monthly reports for budgetary purposes. The profit and loss reports in QuickBooks, they're very helpful, and the budget to actual profit and loss are helpful, but only once you enter the budget for the city. You can access your reports by going from the top menu, choosing Reports, Company and Financial, Profit and Loss Standard, or you can actually go to the Report Center and get to the same place. Always check dates when you're running reports, making sure that you have the time period that you want, and always make sure you click refresh if you change those dates. So our profit and loss actually groups these items by the revenue categories and the expenditure categories that we set up. Here is where we get to see the payoff for all the effort in the uniform chart of accounts. The setup and the time that we took in our setup is now paying off because the financial statements look the way we want them to look. Find a report style that you like, and then click on Memorize so that each month you can run the same reports over and over again. When you click the Memorize button, the dialog box will come up. You will name it something that is familiar to you. I've named this one Profit and Loss Monthly Report for Council Meeting so that each month I know that this is what I run to go to the council meeting. In addition to budget reports, it's also a good idea to run vendor agings so that you can see the vendors and how much you owe, and to run customer agings to see how much the customers actually owe you. The Memorized Reports area is a great place to put different types of reports, financial, accounts receivable, accounts payable, all in one place, so you can just go down through a checklist and run those reports each month. Remember, QuickBooks will export anything to Excel, but you should make sure that you're only changing formatting when it actually exports to Excel. If you're changing numbers when you export to Excel, maybe you should look inside QuickBooks and correct the issue, because it may be seen as though you are keeping two sets of books, and that is a bad perception and can lead to poor internal controls. So really reserve Excel for only changing formatting issues if you can. Let's make sure we've covered how to enter your budget so that the budget actually appears on the reports. You'll click on Company, then Planning and Budgeting, and then you'll select Set Up Budgets. When the dialog box appears, you input the fiscal year and you select Profit and Loss and Continue. There's no additional criteria here, so you'll click Next. And the first time that you do a budget, I would create from scratch, but once you've been using QuickBooks for a while, you may wish to change that to last year's actual, and then you click Finish. You can enter budgets where you take the number and divide by 12 and enter 1/12 in each month, or you can enter your budget in the first month of your fiscal year. Most people who start in QuickBooks enter their budget in the first month of the fiscal year, and that's what's been shown here, just an example of a 2015 calendar year where they've entered their budget in January. Now when we go to run that profit and loss report, we actually see the budget appear. I like to change this report for my column headings to be totals only. And again, you can drill down on any one of these numbers by clicking on the numbers to get the detail of what makes up. Just a reminder, if you have a fiscal year end from June to July, or July to June, for example, that July 14 to June 15 is considered fiscal year 15 inside QuickBooks. You'll want to make sure your company information has your right fiscal year end month, whether that is December or June or some other month. Just make sure it's done appropriately in the company setup, because it will affect what reports you run and how they're run. In our session today, we've been able to enter deposits, reconcile bank statements, and look at some of the budget reports that we most commonly use. Remember, we do have other sessions in QuickBooks that are on GMA's website. We have one on navigation and setup. We have one on accounts payable. We actually have two on payroll. We broke that into two segments. And now this one on the accounts receivable, receipting, and reconciling function. We're always looking forward to your feedback. Let us know what future tutorials you might need that might be helpful for you. GMA is always listening to your feedback. They desire to provide tools that are helpful for you in day-to-day operations and running of City Hall. We thank you for attending with us today. This will be on the website, and if you have future comments, questions that you would like concerning QuickBooks or other financial matters, please contact Pam or myself, and our emails are actually located here. Thanks so much for attending.